Chris Trick, man, what's going on?
What's going on, my friend?
I'm wearing a jacket just because of you. I don't wear this jacket for anybody, but it's for
Oh,
Chris Trick, you know?
hey, blue and red are my two favorite colors, so you read my mind, man,
Oh, yeah. That's awesome. Blue is my favorite color.
All right.
I don't know so much about red. Red's cool. What shirt you got on right now?
So as most of you who are probably watching know or may not know, I'm a mega Sopranos fan. So the shirt I got on right now is a line from season 3, episode 11, Pine Barrens, which is considered by many to be the greatest episode of the show. And two of the main characters get lost in the woods, and they're running after some Russian guy that owes one of the other mafiosos money. But of course, they're out in the woods, and so they can't really hear anything. And so one of the characters, the late Tony Sirico, Paulie Walnuts, calls Tony Soprano after Tony Soprano comes out of a meeting with a Russian mobster, and the connection's really bad. So what Tony really says, oh, this guy killed 16 Chechen rebels. He was in the interior ministry. But then he hangs up the phone, and Paulie doesn't really understand what he's saying, and so he turns to the other character with him, Michael Imperioli, playing Christopher Moltisanti, and he's like, you're not going to believe this. The guy killed 16 Czechoslovakians. This guy was an interior decorator or something, not a member of the interior ministry. And then Christopher goes, really? His house looked like crap.
Yeah. Yeah, Tony Soprano's trying to tell him all this information, right? And his phone keeps dying. He's like, listen.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's one of the many moments of ambiguity that David Chase puts into the show, because we never actually know what happens to that Russian guy. And then at the end of the episode, when Bobby Bacala and Tony go to pick them up, Tony essentially tells Paulie, hey, this guy comes out from under a rock. You take the heat, you deal with Slav, it's your mess. Understood? And so, but we never know what really happens to him ever again. Like many things in the show, but I'm sure we'll get into that. So
Yeah, this is where I should insert that you're the biggest Sopranos fan I've ever met in my life. I mean, you were it's amazing. Especially when I just watched the show for the first time.
mhm.
Sadly, I'm 43 and I'm just now watching the show, and to have you in the corner just telling me, any questions I've had, you were like, listen, this, yeah, I would give a reference point. You would know the exact episode, the season. It's like Rain Man stuff.
Oh, goodness gracious. Yeah, I'm not, generally speaking, I'm really not a big TV guy. So I do my once a year Sopranos rewatch, and every 3 or 4 years, I'll pick a show that I really, really think I'm going to get into, and then I'll watch that. But so just every year, usually once a year, I go back and watch it. I've seen the whole show 10 times. I've been watching since I was 12. I don't recommend it. It's not a show for most 12-year-olds, but I was very sneaky and probably a little bit more mature than most 12-year-olds. It was all right, but it's been a big part of my life, one of my personal passions. So,
well, I was gonna show you this. I got my first Trenton cup. I don't know how old this is, but if you see the Trenton logo on there, I mean, this is like 2003, maybe 2004.
oh
That's
wow,
how we know each other. We are coworkers at Trenton Systems.
that is right.
You started in 2000. Wait, well, let me give you the proper.
That's right.
You came down here from Long Island, New
Mhm.
York, which is
Mhm.
amazing. Back in 2021.
Mhm.
You started at Trenton and when?
So my
2000.
first day at Trenton Systems was November 8th, 2021, almost exactly 6 months after I graduated from college. I had the distinct pleasure of graduating in the COVID economy, and coming out of college during that time was not exactly the best time to be doing so. But I'm very fortunate and very appreciative that Trent decided to take a chance on me, and I certainly don't regret it. And I've had a great. I mean, it actually was just 2.5 years, May 8th, actually. So it's been a great time. So I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, no. When you started, I remember I'm trying to remember. We bonded over music initially, and you were
Sure.
talking. I think who was the band we're talking about? Eagles or something. So you gave me a list too of music that we're gonna go through as well. But anyway, man, Long Island. That's pretty. I was looking at Long Island, like the scenery and everything. You got the beaches right there. You got a ton of food. That looks like the perfect place to live. I know it's expensive to live there. Property taxes are high. But so is this why you didn't stay there? Like what made you come to Atlanta,
Well, and I got my one of my favorite beverages, unsweetened iced tea. So I'm going to be drinking that while we're doing this podcast, if it's all right with you. So Long Island. So I have to say right off the bat, obviously it's kind of a disadvantage maybe being down here and not being around my family. I'm very close with my family, so I try to make it up there as much as possible. New York has changed a lot. Really, I would say since, the early 2000s. So 9/11 and the 2008 recession is really what accelerated I guess you could call it the downfall of the New York area. I mean, for what it's worth, it still is the Big Apple. It's still the biggest city in the United States. It's a world-class city, no doubt about it. There's a lot to see. There's a lot to do. It's basically the hub of any industry you can possibly think of, especially finance. So there's a ton of jobs. And if you live on Long Island, people also live in southwestern Connecticut and in Westchester and in northeast Jersey near the Sopranos and all that kind of stuff. But living on Long Island, you're essentially a half hour from the beach, 45 minutes to an hour and a half from the wineries out east or from the city. A lot of safe neighborhoods and good schools. So that's definitely an upside. But I mean, just to give you, some perspective, so the median rent in Manhattan is $5,500 a month, about. And a studio apartment on Long Island to live in somebody's basement is like $3,000 a month. And so, I understand that it's not. I understand that it's not necessarily easy to just pack up and move away from friends and family, especially when you're very close. But, at a certain point, when you see, people your age or older that are still living with their parents until they're in their mid-30s and have to put together a ridiculous down payment to live in a shoebox and save no money for the present and for retirement, you really can't afford to have a family of your own. So there's really no choice. So that would be really part one. Part two, I guess I am a born and bred New Yorker, but, there's nice people and not so nice people everywhere. It's not exclusive to any specific place. I just think the Northeast in general, other than being super expensive, the cold, I don't really mind as much. Everything moves a million miles an hour. I kind of like how in the South and in the Midwest, people are a little bit more down to earth and a little bit slower pace of life. And not everything is about, money and opulence and conspicuous consumption and what do you do for work and that kind of stuff. If that's for some people, that's cool. That really wasn't for me. So I kind of decided that it was time to make a change. So here I am in sunny Atlanta, Georgia at Trenton Systems.
What did your that's a huge commitment, by the way, getting out of high school and then deciding to leave, your close family, you guys are close, and you're moving so far away. I mean, you had to have been hesitant. Like, what were your parents? Were they encouraging? Were like,
Well,
we trust you?
yeah, I mean, my folks had been telling, so I will say, so I have to give a shout out to the grandparents, two of the most wonderful people in the world. So I've always told people I really have, quite honestly, two sets of parents. My father's parents, unfortunately, are no longer with us, but I'm very close with my mother's parents. They've essentially been like a second mom and dad to me and my sister, but they were, growing up in the 40s, 50s, 60s. So back then, there really wasn't a lot of moving around. Everybody stayed in one place. My whole family's really from Queens and parts of Brooklyn and then moved to other parts of Queens and Long Island. So they didn't particularly understand. But, as time went on, they, were happy that, I was doing what I wanted to do and they still got to see me and FaceTime and all that. So that was good. But my parents essentially told my sister and I from the time we entered high school, when you guys graduate from college, if you want to stay here for a few years and live at home, fine. But New York is not the place to be that it once was. So they were all about me moving down here. So, but I actually, the first time that I set foot in Atlanta was actually 3 weeks or so right after Halloween before I came down here to look for an apartment. Because when I graduated from college, it was just like, all right, I don't want to be in the Northeast. I don't want to be on the West Coast. I'll either somewhere in the Midwest or somewhere in the South, pick up, go work for a couple of years, see how I like it. Do I want to stay? Do I want to move on elsewhere? And so, here I am in Atlanta. So, been getting used to not taking public transportation and driving to work every day and the traffic and interesting drivers and all that and a lot of trees and a lot of lakes and stuff. So it's been interesting, and the lack of Southern accents, which was a little bit of a disappointment, but I know that that's been the case since the Olympics when everybody decided to move here. So,
Yeah, when you go back home on holidays, do your parents think your accent's gone a little Southern, or you stay true to your Long Island roots? I don't know.
So a lot of people, especially at Trenton Systems, kind of like the New York accent. I think maybe I've lost it slightly since I started living down here because honestly, I've actually heard more Midwestern accents, like from Chicago and Milwaukee and all those places down here, more so than I've heard Southern accents, because Atlanta is essentially a transplant city. So I haven't been really around a lot of Southern accents. So my accent has maybe gone a little bit more neutral, but every now and then a New York word still pops up, and people ask me to put on a performance sometimes. Like, can you say coffee for us? I'm like, oh boy. So
what is your job title at Trenton? That's what I'm trying to ask.
was here. So I was the digital marketer. Although, Yaz has, for those of you who may not know, Yaz, my former boss, has decided to move on to bigger and better things. So I wish him all the best in that endeavor. But quite honestly, I'm really running our marketing department right now with our chief commercial officer. So I'm essentially the head of our marketing department. I guess my title is a little bit ambiguous. I don't want to say anything definitively. I think according to HR, it is still digital marketer, but there's been a lot of changes that I wanted to make and a lot of things that I wanted to explore, especially more on the product development and product marketing and market research and competitive analysis side of things, which is really where a lot of Bob's passion lies, as well as mine. So it's been great to really, take on some of that initiative and kind of craft things to the way that, I'd like to see things kind of work moving forward, and working in a little bit more of a different fashion with our sales department and our business development and engineering department. So it's a good time. So, but I am any and all thing marketing. I am a 1.5 man marketing team. So got to give Bob some of the credit. He's been very helpful moving forward thus far. So
Bob is the man. Bob.
Yeah, love him.
Bob.
Love him. I've always told people, and if he's watching this, I want him to see this. That guy is my spirit animal, no doubt about it. Like, he's old fashioned, he's old school, just like me. He's very focused, very organized, great integrity, really gets into the weeds with the people that work for him. I'm really enjoying working for him. And, we both use the same kind of quirky phrases into the same kind of music. So I love it. And the Midwestern accent is great.
Has Bob commented on the Tony Soprano prop that I got you?
Yeah, so I think this is probably going back a little, probably mid 2022 and onward. I know he's seen the show. I don't know if he's seen the entire show. A couple of people have walked by and said, "Oh, that's cool." So for those of you who don't know, so Scott was kind enough, I guess, as a little Christmas gag gift, to get me a cutout of Tony Soprano from, I think, basically the first season. And it says, "We've got the hit that everybody's talking about." And it's a picture of Tony Soprano, but it was supposed to be like a giant cardboard cutout, right? Like what you have on your desk.
Yeah, I ordered, just a quick story. I ordered this, not reading the fine print and thinking this is going to be huge. Tony Soprano, it's going to be hilarious. Mm-hmm. Kind of a gag gift or whatever for Chris, and sure. It arrived in my mailbox. I was like, "What is this letter? What is this thing?" And I open it, and the prop is, I don't know, 8 inches long. But in my mind, I'm thinking this is a big Tony Soprano prop. So, I'll try to put a picture that comes up on there.
Nah, it was much appreciated. I always love little things like that. I got that, and I got a framed Sopranos poster on the wall, and then I got another one here in my apartment. So I got a lot of Sopranos paraphernalia, T-shirts and stickers and books, and obviously have the whole series on DVD in a special sacred place in my room back on Long Island. So
I was going to ask you,
sure.
Do you prefer reading a book or listening to the Audible book, or do you care? Do you listen to both? Read both?
So it's interesting. I mean, I do, obviously being in college and high school, essentially a lecture is a form of audio listening, reading, what have you. But I'm kind of old school. Like, I like having the actual physical book and reading it, and then being able to have it on a bookshelf to go back to it every now and then if I need to. I know my mom is really into audiobooks and reads them like a million miles an hour, in which case I don't even know how you understand what's going on in the plot of the story, but that's another conversation.
Oh, yeah, they have the speed on there.
It's like, oh, are we in Manhattan again? Everybody's talking a million miles an hour. Can't understand what they're saying. So, it's but yeah, I like reading physical books. What about you?
I love the Audible book, of course. I've never been. Cool. I've read maybe 2 or 3 books my whole life, but I love I just love listening. I love it in the car,
Sure.
But I'm a big fan. But I do want to definitely listen to some of these Soprano books that you've suggested.
Yeah, so there's the first one, which is called The Soprano Sessions, which is essentially an in-depth look at every episode of every season of the show. And then I think the last part of the book, it's a little bit bittersweet. It's actually, so at James Gandolfini's wake, which it's going to be 11 years next month already since he passed on, David Chase gave a eulogy at the church in Manhattan where the funeral was, and the last part of that book is his eulogy. So that's really cool. There's another book that I've read that was called The Sopranos and Philosophy, which is kind of taking like literally philosophical, like Aristotle, Plato, that kind of stuff, and applying it to like the earlier seasons of the show. I think the first 4 seasons of the show. And then there is another book that I read, and there's other books, but I won't mention all of them now. So I don't know if you're familiar, but Steve Sciarippa and Michael Imperioli had a podcast called Talking Sopranos, where they were on and literally going, just dissecting scene by scene every single episode. And then they released a book called Woke Up This Morning, The Definitive Oral History of the Sopranos, which is essentially just snippets and interviews from the podcast, and they put it in the book. I didn't watch the podcast because, it's an hour and a half of them telling me stuff I already know. I'll watch clips and interviews here and there, but I read the book, so it was really cool. So yeah,
I've got to check that book out. That sounds awesome.
Yeah. So.
And later on, I got a few Soprano trivia questions, but I think you're just gonna know them all.
Well, I wouldn't listen. I know a lot about the show, but there's something that's the other nice thing that's really great about the show is that even though I have seen the entire show from start to finish 10 times, every single time I go back, there is something different that I discover. It's like, so, I mean, completely unrelated, but I like all the old literature and stuff. So like Hamlet, one of my favorite works of literature of all time, didn't even use the Cliff Notes. I read it a million times when I was a senior in high school, really enjoyed it, go back every now and then and read it. Really, in my opinion, the definitive work of Western literature. I know it's not appealing to many today, and that's understandable, but really, really good stuff. All famous phrases that we use. But every single time I go back and read that, there's something new that I discover, whether it's a choice of words or a plot point or something that I didn't know about before. So that's what's really great about the show, is that you can just keep going back and watching again and again and again, and it never gets old. It's a wealth of knowledge and philosophical themes, if you will. So
wow, good point. 10 times. Are you gonna like where's the end goal? Like, are you like 20 times total, or like, I mean, you just don't like it. When's the next time you're gonna check out the series again? From start to finish.
Well,
when's the 11th time?
I got you. So I do have some self-control. So I remember that I finished towards the end of October last year was rewatch number 9. 2 rules I have. Number 1, it has to be at least a year in between each rewatch. So it won't be until like November, Thanksgiving time that I'll start watching it again. And number 2, this is like a grave sin. I will never go back and just watch a random episode. It has to be in order when I'm watching the show, or I don't watch it at all, because it's like it's disrespectful in my opinion to do that. It doesn't give it the reverence that it really deserves. So,
all right. So in between Soprano talk, I wrote some random questions down.
Sure.
And so let me ask the first one. Okay, Long Island has a soccer team, and hopefully I'm getting the answer right here. Do you know the name of Long Island's soccer team?
Is it like a professional soccer team?
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you. I don't really follow sports. Who are they? I really don't know.
Long Island Rough Riders. I thought that sounded funny. Is this still a team, or is this like I believe everything I look up on Google? Long Island Rough Riders.
But I don't. Originally, I thought that the Braves were a basketball team when I moved down here. No, that's how bad I am. So.
Growing up, were you into sports?
I mean, and what I'm about to say, I say in a joking manner. Was I like every 6-year-old forced to play Little League by my father? Sure. But was I really into sports? Not particularly. I mean, I remember that we went it's going to be 16 years ago this year. I know I went with my dad to visit with his first cousin and her family in the Dallas area, and we went to a Dallas Cowboys game. So that was kind of cool. And I mean, growing up, maybe every now and then we would watch a Cowboys game because my father was into it, or my cousin Daniel's really into the Mets, so we'll go every now and then to a Mets game. But I'm not. I mean, I don't. Not that I like dislike it. I just don't find it particularly interesting. If it's on with other people, I'll watch just to socialize and chat. But other than that, I don't really follow sports. So, were you a big sports guy, or?
My dad was big on us playing baseball. Like, he coached my brother and I back. Like, he would one year he'd coach me, the other year he'd coach my brother. My brother's good. I was more like,
sure,
we get free ice cream at the end. Like, I was always looking for the perks. Like, I don't know. Yeah, I was never great at sports.
Great minds think alike. I would have been asking ice cream, hot dogs, hamburgers. Oh yeah.
Yes, dude. Yeah. Okay. I got a couple more random questions.
Sure.
Growing up in Long Island,
Mhm.
How old were you when 9/11 happened? I mean, were you like a little kid?
So actually, that was my father's second day of work at the company that he works at now, and he saw the second plane go into the building. So I was born on December 18th, 1999. So that was 9/11, 2001. And luckily, so my grandfather was a battalion chief, FD&Y, for 10 years. Thankfully, he missed 1993, and then he retired at the end of 2000. Unfortunately, some of his friends did not make it through 9/11, but he got out just in time. And so we were at the house on Long Island, our old house in Williston Park on the North Shore. And then my grandfather had to actually go into the city to pick up my father and his friend Rob and bring them back to Long Island. So it was, I mean, I've seen
Wow.
the footage in the news reports. Terrible, terrible day, very scary. And like I said, that along with 2008 definitely changed, New York City and Long Island, for, I guess you could say, for the worse. I mean, I remember, and after 9/11 a little bit, but not so much, but definitely after 2008, even the corporate culture on Wall Street has really changed. I remember my father, his boss, he's got a guy by the name of Peter. He used to have like Christmas parties and invite all of us in, and he knew my father and was like a genuinely nice guy, said nice things about him, knew my mother and me and my sister by name, and pizza party for the kids and ordering stuff for the adults. And we'd have parties out on the island at a place called Jillian's, which is an old place that's like the equivalent of like a Dave and Buster's, and like a genuinely nice culture. Bring your kids in, to work around Thanksgiving and Christmas. After 2008, could not care less about the people that work for them, which is really unfortunate. So that's,
Wow.
and New York was always more expensive than the rest of the country, even way back in the day. But my folks bought a house on Long Island on the North Shore in the late 90s. And like the average in a normal market, average appreciation for the price of your home is like 4 to 6% every year. And basically, I don't need to give away the exact number, but from 1997 to 2007, when we were living there, the price of that house tripled in value. And I don't particularly know what great growth in New York City happened. New York City already was what it was, just like Chicago and Los Angeles, and it wasn't an up and coming city. So I don't know. And then we eventually moved from North Shore to our house on the South Shore in 2007 in a neighborhood called Massapequa. Relatively, I guess, famous place because Jerry Seinfeld and Alec Baldwin are from there. So apparently that's a big deal. So yeah, but no, I was a little kid when 9/11 happened, and my sister was not born yet when that happened. So I don't really remember much, but obviously a terrible tragedy, and they've tried to rebuild as best they can afterwards. And I think now they have the Freedom Towers where One World Trade Center used to be. So I've been there and seen the monument once or twice, but it was interesting.
You have. So you visited the new monument, and your family visited as well, I guess? Is that?
Yeah, actually, I think the first time that we visited, this was, again, I think December of 2013, and my father's cousins from Texas were in, and they were visiting, and I believe we went together to go and visit. So it's a somber place, but if you're in New York, it's definitely some place that you have to check out to really understand what, that was really like and the impact that it had on the city. So, it's there's definitely a lot to see, in New York City, that included, and a lot of other stuff. But yes, I've been to the monument before. So
So here's one more random question to
Sure.
follow up the 9/11 question. What better way to ask you I heard a rumor that you have a pet rabbit. Is this true or false?
That is absolutely true. The pet rabbit is back on Long Island. So in my family, we've had rabbits since 1998. So we've had Buster, we've had Coco, we've had Pepper, we had Roxy, we had Patches, we had Carmel, and now we have probably the best money as of yet, Graham. So Graham is spectacular. He's really cute. We got him September 30th, 2022 is when we got him. Nice, really friendly, really playful. And I always tell people, if you don't want to get a dog, and I'm not a particularly big dog person, but if you want the perfect compromise between a dog and no pet at all, I kid you not, get a male rabbit. Because especially if you train them, and you can, they're like dogs. When you call their name, they follow you. You can, some people attempt to put them on a leash. That's not very successful, but they could be potty trained just like a dog. They follow you around. They sit with you on the couch. They jump in bed with you. They have a routine. Like our rabbit lives like a king. Like 6 o'clock in the morning, my parents are getting ready to go to work, and they let him out, and they give him his oats and his banana, and he goes upstairs under their bed and sleeps, and then exactly on the dot at 6 o'clock, comes down for his oats and his hay, and lays out on the floor like he's on the beach, and he's a character. So yes, I do have a pet rabbit, a very, very big part of the Trick family. But I think this will be the last pet now that my sister and I are out of the house. But we're big rabbit people. So
what makes a family become rabbit people? Were you like, did your family like, we tried the dog, we tried the cat?
My father is way too into the house and the furniture, which I don't blame him. To get a dog. And having a dog, it takes a certain type of personality, especially, I mean, I don't want to say it in this manner. I want to say if you're a clean person, but, you really have to be able to handle the mess and the hair. And also, it honestly is like having another child, because the expenses for dogs to get surgery and take them to the vet, I mean, it adds up, even with insurance, like 5-figure bills for surgery, having to pay expensive amounts of money to have somebody watch it when you go away. So you really have to really be into it. It's a big commitment. My parents would never put up with that. I am not a big dog person. My sister loves dogs. So eventually when she moves out, she may get a dog of her own. I don't know if it's a Great Dane or a Bulldog or what kind of dog she's into these days. But like I said, if people want a pet, but they don't want a dog, but they want a dog-like pet, get a rabbit. Seriously, no joke.
When you say the rabbit's potty trained, do you just let it go out in the yard and just come back in like a dog would?
No. So actually, well, rabbits can be outside animals, but we think the COD for a couple of our previous rabbits was that we let them on the grass with pesticides, and eating pesticides has not been known to be the healthiest thing, especially for animals with sensitive digestive tracts. So our rabbit actually lives inside. He doesn't live in a cage. He lives in a dog pen and has a cat litter box to do his business on. But yeah, for the most part, I mean, he's actually really is potty trained. You have to do it a little bit when they're younger, but over time, every now and then, like dogs, there's incidents here and there. But for the most part, yeah, especially if you leave food. He loves food. Anywhere there's food, he'll go. He's like me. So.
What kind of food? Like, I don't mean to keep talking about rabbits, but you do like carrots and stuff.
So his diet consists of, so he has the rabbit pellets, Timothy hay. They can have as much of that as they want. It's a very healthy thing for them, but it's, I guess, like a treat. He'll have a couple of carrots. He has like oats, like plain beige gold colored oats. And every now and then, actually, rabbits do a little dance when they eat bananas, apparently, like, they do a little shake, shake, shake because they get so excited. So he has a little piece of banana every day. My parents talk to him like he's a baby, so they call it nanas. I'm like, really, guys? Like 55 and 54, you're talking to a rabbit like he's a baby. Like, come on. But mostly they're herbivores. You obviously can't feed them meat. My parents thought it was cute to give them muffins and a little part of a muffin and some cereal. Sugar's not good for their digestive tract, and he got a little sick. Thankfully, he's better now, so we're back on the strictly herbivore, plant, oat, carrot, banana-based diet. So,
Okay. So now I want to go to. Oh no, I got one more question. So, are you dating anyone now? Is Chris Trick single? Are you? Yes. Are you ready to mingle, or what's up, man?
Chris Trick is currently a single guy. Yes, that could be a whole other conversation why that's the case. But yeah, currently I was in a relationship for a few months last year. For reasons that I'm going to keep to myself, that unfortunately had to come to an end. But yeah, right now, kind of just, living my life and hanging out with my friends and, focusing on work and going out and being social and, just kind of going with the flow, so.
No, that's good.
Sure.
Okay. So I asked you earlier if you could send me some of your top 5, and you gave me your top 4, your favorite. We always bond over music, man. That's like kind of where we first started hanging out. But
sure.
The first one you got on your Chris's favorite music artist, the Rolling Stones.
Oh yeah, so that's another. So thank you to the movie Goodfellas for getting me into the Rolling Stones, because "Gimme Shelter" and "Monkey Man," two songs that were played in that movie, and I was hooked ever since. I'm actually going to see them 2 weeks from tomorrow at Mercedes-Benz with my buddy Matt from Chicago, so that'll be great. My cousins in Texas actually just saw them, and they said it was like one of the best shows they've ever seen. So, because Mick Jagger and my grandfather are literally 1 week apart in terms of birthday, and I share a birthday with Keith Richards the day of the month, not the year.
Oh, cool. Not the year.
So,
What two songs were they? You said Goodfellas. Did you say those two songs that you heard?
Yeah, there were two songs. So "Gimme Shelter," which is basically in every Martin Scorsese movie known to man, and "Monkey Man," both off their 1969 album "Let It Bleed," which is one of my two favorite Rolling Stones albums. The second being 1971 "Sticky Fingers." So yeah, and since then I've been hooked ever since. I probably got close to 120, 130 songs by them on my iPhone. So I'm a fanatic.
Dude, it is amazing how much knowledge you have in your. You just recite everything like that, and you do that with everything. You do it with the Sopranos music. Have you always been that way? Like, growing up?
I mean, I want to try and make this sound as humble as possible, but I think, definitely growing up, I would say that math and science weren't necessarily my strong suits, but English and history were. So I loved history, I loved English, I love remembering details and knowing little trivial bits of information to share with people. So I mean, I was the recipient of the Trenton Systems Awards 2023, the Human Google. So that's got to mean
Yes.
something, right?
And
So,
yeah, that's great. Oh, okay. So, the second artist we got the Eagles.
oh,
I love the Eagles.
The Eagles are so. When I was younger, I mean, I knew some of their songs, but I wasn't like crazy into the Eagles. But like over the past year and a half or so, last year I did a deep dive into the Eagles, all 6 original albums. So Eagles, Desperado, On the Border, One of These Nights, Hotel California, and The Long Run. And I don't count their album that they made in 2007. The original 6 albums, the original discography from the 70s, there is not one bad song on any one of those albums. I mean, the attention to detail that those guys put into every single one of their songs, how crisp, how clean, how clear they are, the harmonies, their live performances. I mean, just the coolness and the swagger. I mean, every time I hear, and I know that live videos and live albums are overdubbed in the studio, but you can't really do it too much because it's still live. And I'll listen to it and I'm like, this was live? Like, oh my gosh. So I didn't see them. I mean, I didn't bother to see them when they came to Atlanta last year because that was Don Henley and friends, and Don Henley is the only original member that's still left, and there was no Glenn Frey, and so I'm like, I don't want to go see that. But yeah, love the Eagles, big Eagles fan, definitely.
Yeah, I
So,
love that. I think me and you've talked about before, but the documentary, the history of the Eagles. That's probably one of my favorite documentaries ever. I mean,
it
it's just a long, but it's so good.
It is good. I mean, I think they had great footage. They had great interviews. I will say, I mean, this is kind of a well-known fact that Don Henley and Glenn Frey are two pretty arrogant and egotistical people. And definitely the way that it was the Eagles' history, according to Don Henley and Glenn Frey. And, Don Felder was painted as a villain. And of course, Don Felder has his side of the story. But that's with any band though. But I agree. It was a great documentary. It was long, but a lot of great footage, a lot of great interviews, lots of great music. So yeah, I definitely enjoyed it. It was a good time.
Don Felder, did you read his book? I mean, I've listened to the Audible book, and it was so good.
No, I have not. I have not. That'll be on my list eventually. I don't actually, quite frankly, I think most of the rock and roll books that I've read have been the Motley Crue books by Vince Neil and Tommy Lee and Nikki Sixx and the Dirt and all that other kind of stuff. So I think those are really the only rock books that I've actually ever read in my life. I don't even think I've read Keith Richards' autobiography, which I keep trying to get around to, but I've never had the time to do so. But no, I didn't read Don Felder's book. I should though, because I've heard it's very good.
Okay. Okay. Let me go back to a couple more random questions here. I'm going back and forth.
No, sure.
And we can edit this out, but we were talking about. I think I brought it up earlier, but you mentioned you would go to the gym, and just now in our interview, you're drinking unsweet tea. Chris Trick, what is Chris's vices? What do you do that's like frowned upon? Is there anything? I mean, that's you never went through a phase where you're like, hey, do you drink alcohol or anything? What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, every now and then, I'll drink and get a little sauced up, as my friends from Chicago like to say. They don't say drunk; they say sauced up. So, no, quite frankly, I'm kind of an old soul kind of dude. I'm really, I mean, I'm 24, but I really tell people I'm 84. I am more of a, I kind of, just quiet. Excuse me, I wouldn't say quiet. I'm definitely not quiet, but I'm not really into partying or loud clubs or bars or stuff like that. That's never really been my thing. If that's that's what other people like, that's cool. Different strokes for different folks. But my idea of fun, sitting around with some buddies on a Saturday night and watching a movie or going to dinner or taking a trip somewhere. So not the most exciting thing to do in your 20s, I guess. But I mean,
that's cool.
I was a teenager once. So I whatever comes along with that territory. But no, I've kind of managed to. I know I'm boring, but I've kind of managed to keep myself out of trouble.
No.
So.
No, that's amazing that you're 24. I always forget that because you are such an old soul. And so I think my brother refers to you as a time traveler. But
Is
you are
that
24.
what calls me?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, kind of.
Traveler, I love that. That's great. Oh man, no, Michael's the man. Love that guy.
Yeah, I kind of hope my son turns out to be kind of like you, like the old soul. You know, like you don't have to party to have a good time. Just
thank you.
watch a movie.
I'm flattered.
Yeah. I could be a bad influence on you too, so you may not want to hang out with me too much.
That's right. Hey, listen, I have friends of all different stripes, man. You know, as long as you're a nice guy and you know, live and let live, I'm cool, man. You know, I try not
Yeah.
to.
And speaking of like how a nice guy you are and you don't party, one of your favorite bands is Motley Crue. That's kind of funny.
So I'll definitely say that a Motley Crue concert is definitely not the place that I would go to be looking for the future Mrs. Trick. I will say I call Motley Crue my guilty pleasure band. So, you know, this is great. So 6 years old, I remember, or maybe 7. This was back when we were in our old house in Williston Park. And my dad had just he was really excited. You know, he never really did anything for himself. So he got himself, you know, a BMW. He was very into cars and whatnot. So it was something cool to take me and my mom and my brother and sister out. And so he could take his drives. And when he did that, he got a whole bunch of CDs from when he was younger. So he was born in 1968. He grew up in the 80s. So he liked Depeche Mode and the Thompson Twins, but also Motley Crue
cool.
and Ozzy and all that kind of stuff. And so he got a whole bunch of CDs. And at this time, maybe my sister's like 3, 4 years old, and maybe 6, 7, or something along those lines, very young. And he has Motley Crue's greatest hits in the car. He's like, Christopher, put on track 3, and it's Girls, Girls, Girls. And you know, for those of us who don't know what the song is about, it's about them attending a series of gentlemen's clubs. They reference the Tattletale here in Atlanta. And I asked my dad, I'm like, Dad, you know, you were pretty good about, you know, what's appropriate, what's not. You did your job right. Like, why would you let me and my sister listen to a song about strip clubs? Like, well, you didn't know what they were talking about. I'm like, no, I didn't. But still, like, so I've seen Motley Crue 3 times. First time I saw them was at Jones Beach Theater in 2012 with Kiss. Me and my dad went.
Oh, that's
I've never
cool.
seen my dad so happy in his whole life. I mean, he was like a kid in a candy shop. I mean, he was singing, dancing. Probably the only time I've seen him had a good time in his life. We did that, and then we went with my father's brother and my cousin, and we saw them again at Jones Beach on the final tour. And then me and my father and my uncle saw them at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn in 2015. Tommy Lee had a big roller coaster that he called the Crucify. He's very known for his big drum solo. So the outdoor concert, we only saw a little bit of it, but the indoor concert, we saw all of it. So that was really good. And I'm disappointed in them now because 2014, winter of 2014, January, big Motley Crue press conference. We don't want to be, you know, 80 and on stage and can't sing. We're signing a cessation of a touring agreement. Like, you know, we're not coming back. We may record some stuff, and now they're going on tour again. And they
they had a contract, and then they blew up the contract, and so a lot of people got mad because they spun it like this is our last tour, so people are spending more money. Like, oh, I gotta see him. You know, how angry would people be? You know, like when they realize, oh, we just, you know, we spent extra money because it was the last time. It's not the last time. They came out and said, we're going to blow the contract up. And nobody really retires, though. Think about Ozzy. Ozzy's his final tour was going to be in 1991 or 1991.
Still alive. Him, Keith Richards, Nikki Sixx, all these people. Like, I don't understand how any of them are still here. They must have like 9 lives, like a cat or something. I don't know.
When you follow, I have a question. When you because when you talk about the Sopranos, you know every season and every show. Are you that way with music as well? I mean, you know, like every Motley Crue album. I mean, you have like your favorites. You know the years and dates and all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, Motley Crue is another one that thankfully they don't really have a very big discography. With the Stones, it's kind of like you know, a lot of the stuff pre-1968. So a lot of the Brian Jones stuff, a lot of the rhythm and blues covers and Baroque pop and psychedelic stuff. You know, that's more of an era of the singles. The albums that they did from 1968 to 1972, Beggar's Banquet, Let It Bleed, Sticky Fingers, and Exile on Main Street were many considered to be the peak of the Stones. And then in the mid-70s, they had some albums that weren't so great. And then their best-selling album from 1978, Some Girls, which was great because they infused their roots with pop and punk and new wave and disco, and they did that really well. And then the last great Stones album from 1981. So if you've seen the album cover with Mick Jagger and Keith Richards with tattoos all over their faces and a dark red background, it's called Tattoo You.
Yeah.
So that album was actually a bunch of outtakes from the 70s that they had laying around, and then they overdubbed them and put them on another record. But, so that's 6 albums I listed by the Stones that I think are solid from front to back. A lot of the other albums are half and half, or 1 or 2 songs, or they're almost there, but there's a couple of songs that I could live without. I mean, when you've had a 60-plus year career, you can't possibly put out something that everybody's going to like all the time. So,
yeah, absolutely.
But the Eagles and Motley Crue are pretty solid with their original discography. And then there's one other guy you forgot to mention.
Well, we're going to get there. Yeah, Elvis Presley. Yes.
I have a special place in my heart for that man. That is, I mean, I know maybe some people will disagree in terms of, in my opinion, greatest male singer, performer.
Down in Louisiana, where they
maybe Freddie Mercury's a close second. I'm not the biggest Queen fan. He was an incredibly talented individual. I love him. I do. I mean, and this is more my grandparents' influence. My grandparents love Elvis. They saw him live at, I believe it was National Museum in the mid-'70s. And actually, I forget if it was a scarf or it was a pin, because my mother was telling me my grandmother got one of those from the concert and then gave it to her. I think it might have been a pin. Oh, put this on your jacket when you go to school and stuff like that. Elvis is a little different, though, because he's not so the first album from 56 and then the other albums, the first album was called Elvis Presley, and then the second album was just called Elvis, and then 57 was the Christmas album. Those are all really great albums. But Elvis is more of a singles artist. He's not really necessarily an albums artist. And I think a lot of his, so like pre-1950 stuff, so a lot of the stuff at Sun Records, the rockabilly and country and rock and roll type stuff with like the crisp background, that's really a lot of great songs by Elvis. And then his stuff throughout the 50s. After he came back from Europe, a lot of his movies, which to be honest, he wasn't a great actor, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, were you a fan of the movies? I mean, it had like the Hawaiian movie.
Well, I've seen clips, but I have never actually sat down and watched an entire Elvis movie. I mean, I know the famous songs from the movies and whatnot. I've seen clips, but I really have not. I probably should at least seen Blue Hawaii or King Creole or Love Me Tender or Viva Las Vegas or one of those. So I have not seen that. But the 60s was more, a couple good songs here and there, but it wasn't great. But then at the end of the decade, when it's like, all right, time to get back to business, he had on NBC what was called the Comeback Special, which I believe originally his manager, Colonel Parker, wanted to be a Christmas special. And it was, back to basics, the hair, the jacket, the T-shirt, the guitar. And then he closed out the night with one of his greatest songs, probably honestly his best performance on record, and one of my favorite songs, If I Can Dream, when he dressed up in the white suit with the red tie and just basically with no really backing band, just backing music in front of a bright sign that said Elvis. And that song was about, because obviously 1968 was a very turbulent year with big political assassinations, Bobby Kennedy and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And he was very conflicted about that. So he decided to write he did not write his song. Other people wrote a song for him because he never actually necessarily wrote any of his own songs. It was always somebody else that did it for him, but he sang. So that was, and then he had some other great songs, Suspicious Minds and The Wonder of You and An American Trilogy and, Kentucky Rain and Burning Love and Moody Blue, all these great songs. So
Polk Salad Annie.
That's right. That's another one I didn't mention. Polk Salad Annie. Excuse me.
I'm sorry. Yeah, he had a note, and I was watching it earlier today, and he was singing it live in his white outfit, and it looked like he pulled out lyrics or something. He just read the lyrics, and then it looked like lyrics. He was just reading them, and then he handed it to the guitar player.
Yeah. There's many phases of Elvis. There's the rockabilly Elvis. There's the movie star Elvis. There's the karate kick Elvis in the white suit. There's the balloon Elvis. So yeah, there's many different phases of Elvis.
I like the vulnerability of Elvis towards the end. Like he's nervous about going out, and it just seemed vulnerable. And I don't know why I like that more than people that seem invincible. I kind of gravitate to people that, I don't know, kind of have their problems on their sleeve or wear it or whatever.
Well, I mean, when you become, so If That's All Right Mama was July, I think, of 1954. So we're coming up on 70 years of Elvis Presley. When you become a world sensation, essentially, overnight at such a young age, maybe this doesn't happen to everybody. And, you feel bad for somebody in that position. But, ultimately, you may have all the money in the world. Your personal life may be a little, with Priscilla and some of his other activities, which I don't necessarily need to get into. There's quite a bit on Elvis Presley. If you saw the movie Priscilla, which was excellent, that came out last year,
Yep.
That was kind of the side of Elvis that they did not show you in Elvis, which was released in 2022. I actually like Priscilla better than I liked Elvis. I thought the other one was a lot, the one that just came out was a little bit more toned down and a little bit more serious. The other one, it just felt very fast paced and a million miles an hour and flashing lights and blow up letters. And I'm like, I can't pay attention to what's going on here, dude. So that was,
I felt the same way. Hey, they're making another Elvis movie. I just found out.
They're making another Elvis movie? Really? What's it called?
2025. I don't know exactly the name of it. It's going to have Ryan Gosling and Jonah Hill's going to be the general. So I just watched the trailer. It actually looked really good.
Colonel Tom Parker. Is this a Diamond Donnie?
Colonel, yeah. I said general. Is it Colonel? I'm sorry. Yeah. What was that?
I said, is this Diamond Donnie Azoff from The Wolf of Wall Street, one of the greatest movies ever?
That is a great movie, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, it's a disgusting movie, but Leo's performance is top notch. I mean, I'm surprised he didn't win an Oscar for that. I mean, he's an incredible actor to begin with, but that movie was just like, wow. Like, he played that almost too well. So, but that's not something I saw when I was 12. So,
in my notes, when we brought up the Rolling Stones, I put, why does Chris hate the Beatles? Because everybody compares Rolling Stones, and which one you got to pick, the Rolling Stones or Beatles? So why wasn't the Beatles on your list? Just curious.
Have I said that I hate the Beatles?
You don't. I'm just trying to throw you off a little bit.
No. So look, I completely acknowledge. It's kind of like I tell people, like, Sopranos is the Beatles of television. So like a show like The Sopranos, I mean, there were sitcoms and there were series, but a show that was really complex that almost brought a cinematic quality to television with just the depth of the characters and the story, and quite frankly, what kind of graphic content you could show on TV, because it was paid TV and it wasn't cable TV. Every show that people like, whether it's Mad Men, my second favorite show, Breaking Bad, or Game of Thrones, or anything like that, they all owe their existence to The Sopranos. And so I say the same thing for the Beatles. Before them, there were no real bands. I mean, there was solo artists like Elvis and, Chuck Berry and the like, and there were doo-wop groups and, I guess instrumental groups and stuff like that. Motown, maybe that was the 70s. I don't know, but just solo artists and instrumental groups and the like. But there wasn't necessarily a band with four guys that played their own instruments and wrote their own music, and the instrumental techniques, the recording techniques, the styles of music that they were pioneers of. I give them all the credit for that. So even if you don't really care for them, they kind of are the greatest band ever, even if you don't really like them. I like some of their music. If you give me like all of their albums, I'll pick off like one or two songs that I like and some of the more popular songs. So I'd much rather listen to them than like rap music, for example. I'm just not particularly a big fan. Now, if my mother's watching this, she'd be like, "What are you talking about? We had all the albums." We had one CD. We had one CD, and that was the Beatles' greatest hits. Like, So
I love the Beatles' greatest hits. So that's what I love.
Okay, that's cool.
I've never deep dived, and I know some of their deeper cuts, but I've always been kind of surface level Beatles.
Sure, I feel you.
All right, okay, so we got to talk about the Sopranos. We got to end this on the Sopranos. So I got these probably easy questions for you.
Sure.
And also I got a couple of them. I got a lot of Soprano questions. We're just gonna get to them all. What's your favorite character and why? That's your first.
I mean, I would have to say Tony Soprano. Quite honestly, I mean, he is the entire show. He is the only. Yep, I think that's right. He is the only member of the cast that has appeared in all 86 episodes. Edie Falco appeared in 85. There was one episode that she wasn't in, and that was season 5, episode 3. Yeah, season 5 episode that she was not in. But I mean, he was, again, the first real anti-hero on TV. The performance was just top notch. And especially when you see interviews of him in real life, and you'll see interviews with the cast, they'll be like, yeah, he played Tony Soprano on TV, but in real life, I mean, he was very generous. I think this was at the end of the 4th season, and people were getting screwed on their contracts, and he wrote a check for like $30,000 to every cast member or stuff like that.
Oh, wow.
Really took a vested interest in the personal lives of his coworkers, really cared. I think actually he called Robert Eiler's agent one time and asked him what he's paying in rent just to make sure he wasn't being stupid and blowing money away. So apparently, from what I hear, he was a really great guy. But I like all the characters, so there's not really much that I don't. I mean, I know everybody dumps on AJ, but I think the point is to not like AJ. That's kind of the point.
I've dumped on AJ quite a bit when we have our talks.
Yeah, I mean that's.
I'm like, he started off so cool, like a cool little kid that listened to metal, heavy music, and everything, and then
That's why you liked him.
That's why I liked him. Yeah. I was gonna ask you, how many people? Do you know how many people tried out for Tony Soprano's character? I mean, because he just seems like it has to be him and him only.
I believe, I might be wrong, but I believe when they were casting the show, I think originally there was talk of Ray Liotta and Lorraine Bracco kind of reprising the same type of roles. So I believe the three contenders for Tony Soprano were Gandolfini, it was Stevie Van Zandt, and it was an actor by the name of Michael Rispoli, if you remember Jackie Aprile from the first 4 episodes, who dies of stomach cancer. And there's that whole debate of who's going to take over, and the whole conversation with Tony and Junior, you come heavy next time or not at all. And if you remember, I told you, so actually that's interesting that we mentioned that character. So this is season 1, episode 4. The title of the episode is called Meadowlands. The reason why is because, in the previous episode, Christopher is brought out to the middle of nowhere, or not the middle of nowhere, I should say, on the dock by a venue, or really an area of New Jersey that's called the Meadowlands. And he references that in this episode. So that's why it's called Meadowlands, kind of a poor title. But in this episode, it has one of my favorite endings of the entire series. So you had asked me when AJ was playing in his room trying to swat the fly. Oh, he's got some Atlanta-based metal bands that I love.
Yeah, Stuck Mojo.
Shirt. Right, exactly. So at school, he gets in a fight with this kid. And eventually they come to the conclusion, hey, let's go on the field and let's fight and let's really duke this out. But then the day of the fight comes, and I think this is earlier in the episode, Tony gets some, I think it's pesticides or insecticide, and he's at a nursery, and he runs into this kid's father, and the kid's father is visibly nervous, being in his presence, and knows, like, I don't want to mess around with this guy. So the day of the fight, AJ and then the guy that he's fighting, his name is Jeremy, they go to the field and they don't fight, and Jeremy opens his wallet and gives him $40. And AJ's like, well, come on, this is a fight. And he's like, no, I can't do this. And he's like, why? He's like, just take the money. I can't do it. I knew you'd chicken out. And then later that night, he goes into his sister Meadow's room, and he says, hey, Meadow, I was going to fight this kid, but for some reason he backed down and he chickened out. And Meadow's like, yeah, sometimes you're really so naive. What do you think that Dad does for a living? And he's like, well, waste management. She's like, yeah. Do you know anybody whose fathers are in waste management that go out early in the morning? You find Cougarans or, automatic weapons, or why do we call this guy uncle when he's not our uncle? He's in Dad's other family. And so she goes on this mafia website and shows him all this stuff. And then the end of the episode is this guy. So I'm getting back to the beginning. Michael Rispoli, Jackie Aprile, it's his funeral. Now in this scene, this is like the last scene of the episode. It's just organ music playing in the background. There is no actual dialogue, but this is kind of in slow motion. And AJ's looking around at the funeral yard. There's the feds taking pictures. There's Tony standing with his mafioso friends, and they're leaning over and whispering in his ear. And his sister Meadow, Jamie Lynn Sigler's character, just looks at him and gives him a look like, still think Dad works in waste management. And then he sees his dad, and his dad gives him a little head nod and gives him a wink. And then the last scene of the entire episode is just AJ with a blank expression on his face, like, holy crap, my dad is not like other dads. What an ending. I mean, what a really, really great ending. And the first 2 seasons have a lot of endings like that, the 2 best seasons of the show, in my opinion. But to answer your question, there were 3 people who were up for the part of Tony Soprano. So, and originally they wanted Lorraine Bracco to play Carmela, but she was like, no, I want to play Dr. Melfi. I've already played the Carmela Soprano character. I want to play Dr. Melfi. And she ended up getting that part, and that was the end of that. So,
wow, I didn't know. That's cool. Okay, so I got some trivia questions, but you're gonna kill these. I know.
I don't know.
This one seemed such a softball after you just gave that long explanation of Tony Soprano. Okay, what is the name of the racehorse that Tony Soprano's once owned? What's
Mine?
Yep. Yes, these are so easy, man. All right. Tony finally begins to grieve for his mother in season 3 while watching what movie?
Jimmy Cagney's The Public Enemy.
Wow, you even have
right. Well, Jimmy Cagney was in The Public Enemy, but I don't necessarily know that he directed it. Excuse me, that's inaccurate. But Jimmy Cagney was in the movie. So, and the last scene of that episode is he's sitting on the couch, and I guess at the end of the movie, the main character, he gets beaten up and left at his mother's front doorstep, essentially dead, I think. And the mother's like, oh my God, my son's coming home. I'm so excited. And he's sitting there on the couch and he's crying because that's essentially the mother that he never had. So, but So
Yeah, that was such a great episode.
and actually, this was so when season 3 premiered on it was March 4th, 2001. Yeah, that was probably the only season where they had 2 episodes on premiere night. So the first episode of that season, Mr. Ruggiero's Neighborhood. Remember when the feds are posing as New Jersey Power and Electric and trying to bug the house and putting the wire on the lamp in the basement and all that other kind of stuff.
Yes, yeah, I remember that.
Again in the car. So
Yeah.
So that would be there you go.
Did you watch The Sopranos when it came on Sunday nights? Right? Was that the night it came on?
Oh no. So the show aired from 1999 to 2007. So the first time I saw the show was in July of 2012. So no.
Oh, okay. So you weren't like waiting every week. I keep thinking you're older because you're a time traveler or whatever.
No, and honestly, so my grandparents watched it when it was on the air, and some of my other relatives did, but my parents never watched it. So that's how I was able to convince my mother to let me rent it from the library because she had never known. Oh, okay, sure, it's just like a gangster show, right? And then I start watching it with her, and she's like, "Why are you watching this? This is so inappropriate." I'm like, "Well, I don't know. I've seen it now.
Dude,
I'm going back." So
it's got to be so awkward too. When you see certain scenes, you're like, can we fast forward this, Ma?
I'm not exactly. That's not really what I'm watching the show for. So, but it's just part of it. So,
yeah, I love when you were telling me because I was like, I watched the show. I used to watch the show on my lunch break, and you're like, there'd be certain episodes you'd be like, listen, do not watch these on your lunch break. Go home. Go in a dark place where no one's around.
And I was always right.
Anybody watch you see this?
I mean, by season 3, people had started to idolize the characters, and so and I don't need to get into the specifics here, but there are 2 episodes in season 3 that involve very, very, very graphic and brutal attacks on characters in the show. And this was to remind the audience that, hey, like these guys are terrible, like they're not good guys. The world they live in is dark and dreary and depressing, and human life is valued. Like you can't idolize these guys. And then people started to cancel their subscription, and then of course season 3 aired in the spring of 2001. 9/11 happened, so they kind of had to tone down the violence a little bit in the season afterwards, and then people complained that it wasn't violent enough. So it's like, what, you can't have it both ways. So
yeah, you can't win. Jeez.
Sure.
Okay, what is Paulie's first name?
So his first name is actually Peter Paul.
Yeah.
Paul T. And he's only referenced as Paulie Walnuts 3 times in the entire show. 3 times in the entire show, they call him Paulie Walnuts. So, but that's what. Oh, I like Paulie Walnuts. Like they've referenced him as that 3 times in the entire show. So,
okay, this last one. I'm not sure if you're gonna get this last one. Okay, how many Emmy nominations did The Sopranos receive in its 6-season run?
Oh goodness gracious! I know it won 21 Emmys.
Yes, I finally got an answer you don't know, man.
No, I don't know that actually. I know it won 5 Golden Globes. I mean, Emmys, wasn't it like almost close to 100 Emmys?
Dang it, you're good, man. It's the answer is 112.
That's what I thought. It's something. I don't know the exact that I wouldn't know. Like I'm not that good, all right? I can't tell you who directed.
I don't know, man. You're pretty good, dude.
Like that, So, but yeah, that's surprising. That's a lot of Emmys. So, I mean, I'm sure there are shows that have won more awards since then because there are people who will argue that Breaking Bad is better than The Sopranos. I disagree with that entirely, but it's a matter of taste. It's not a fact.
Say my name.
But so
I love Breaking Bad.
I know you and my father both thinks it's like the greatest show ever.
Your father thinks that?
Yeah, he does. He loves it. And I'm like, I watched a couple seasons and terrific show, great performances, not denying that at all. I'm just like, and I don't mind if it's slow. I don't have to have action in every episode. I mean, The Sopranos doesn't have that, but it's like, am I missing something here? Like, so, but again, that's a matter of opinion. It's not a fact set in stone. So
does your father like Better Call Saul? Because I love that show too. It's kind of a.
I think maybe he started watching it and then he didn't like it. I know he hated El Camino. He did not like the movie.
Oh, that was so good. I liked it. Yeah.
Oh, you did?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
I'm a sellout for Breaking Bad. I'm like, I like it anything Breaking Bad. Prequel. Oh, I'm all about that. The blue meth. I'm just kidding. I should cut that out.
Is that why you're wearing a blue jacket?
Hey, yeah, man.
Holy Moses.
Okay, here's the last question, Chris. What'd you think about the Sopranos ending? Because it was like, don't stop, and it just ends.
Quite honestly, I think the ending was spectacular. I do, because David Chase plays an ambiguity Like, we don't, like, at the end of season 1, we don't know where, Big Pussy disappears to. We don't
Yes, that
know
was huge.
what happens to the guy that attacks Dr. Melfi in the parking garage. We don't know if Ralphie really burned down the stables, though it's pretty obvious. We don't know what happened to the Russian guy. So if the final scene would be like Boardwalk Empire, where, the guy just goes and shoots him on the boardwalk and that's the final scene, I thought that would have been terrible. I mean, all the major storylines are pretty much wrapped up. Meadow's going to get married. AJ, of course, the spoiled brat, has his anorexic model girlfriend driving a BMW, working on a movie, and Tony's going to be indicted, and Paulie doesn't want to run the April crew, and Silvio's in the hospital, and Bobby's dead, and all that. So there's not really too many loose ends. And I know some people will debate, oh, well, remember when Bobby said, you probably don't even hear it when it happens, and that's why it goes black. And then there's an episode earlier in the second part of the 6th season where somebody gets shot at a restaurant and somebody who's in the room doesn't hear it, until afterwards. So, but I thought it was pretty good, because what would you have liked the ending to be other than a cut to black? Would you have wanted to see them all get killed? Would you maybe just want to see them all sit down and have dinner, which would have been fine as well? But
yeah, you were saying that, like, the ending is not what you would. It happens when you're not expecting it to, right? Wasn't that kind of like being shot or being killed or something, or reference?
well,
That or something like that.
There's that. And then in the first episode of the 4th season, at the end of the episode, Tony goes to Dr. Melfi and he essentially, talks about the state of the world and how his wife is worried about finances, because this was during, the .com bubble. So the United States was in a recession. So I guess they mirrored that in the show. And he's like, listen, there's 2 endings for a high profile guy like me: dead or in the can, meaning dead or in jail. And basically all the major characters in the show are dead or near death or in the can, or in jail.
Yeah.
So, no truer words have been spoken. And then, of course, Carmela says in the same episodes, you can watch the blanking news. Let me tell you, everything comes to an end. And it's true. Everything does. So that's, I thought it was a very good ending.
I liked it too, man. I just thought my TV wasn't working. I literally got up and I was like, what happened?
On June 10th, 2007, that's what everybody thought as well, when their TV went off at 9:59 or 10 o'clock p.m. as well. So you're not the only one.
Yeah, because it's a buildup, like Meadows crossing the street, everything's just building up. They're in a restaurant and then just done.
Yeah, I mean, that's
I liked it though. It was good.
I loved it. I thought it was great. I really thought it was great.
All right, Chris Trick, man, thank you again. And this is awesome.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
I wore my jacket for you.
Next time I got to wear a jacket. Now I feel like, oh my gosh, I'm underdressed for this occasion.
Yeah, you can borrow my jacket. I'm just kidding. But I appreciate it. Thank you.